Welcome to Bruce Hurwitz Presents Meet the Experts. I'm your host, Bruce Hurwitz of Hurwitz Strategic Staffing. You can find us on the web at hsstaffing.com. I hope you'll consider us for all your staffing, career counseling, and professional writing needs. Momentarily, I will be joined by Dr. Ann Dranitsaris and Heather Dranitsaris-Hilliard for a discussion on business and leadership. Meet the Experts is sponsored by P&K CPAs. P&K is a full-service accounting firm. They provide accounting and consulting services to businesses ranging from startups to small and mid-cap companies to nonprofits, as well as high-net-worth individuals. Contact them today for a free consultation at info@pk-cpas.com or call them at 973-882-8810. They will be happy to be of service. Ladies, welcome to the program.
Thanks, Bruce.
Well, this is a first, as I told you, that I have two guests on. So we will do this according to proper protocol. This is not prejudiced in favor of a fellow PhD. She's your mother. She goes first. Would you both take 1 minute to introduce yourself?
I'm Dr. Ann Dranitsaris, and I'm an organizational development and behavioral change consultant and leadership coach. And I work with my daughter, Heather Dranitsaris-Hilliard, at our boutique consulting firm, Caliber Leadership Systems.
And
that's your minute. So I don't know what I'm going to add to that other than my name's different.
All right, we can have a counseling session as to why you wanted to change your name to differentiate yourself from your mother, but that's not the topic, and I'm not that type of doctor.
We've got a great story for it, though. We have a really good story for it.
Go ahead, tell the story.
All right. So Anne is my biological mother, and she placed me for adoption at the time of my birth. And so I was raised by an adoptive in an adoptive family. And when I was 27, Anne and I were reunited. And we discovered that we had this shared interest in passion and helping people and organizations to achieve their potential. 3 years later, we started our business, Caliber Leadership Systems, which is celebrating 25 years at this stage. So as we forged our new relationship, getting to know each other, we also launched into becoming entrepreneurs together, and here we are. So it's quite the journey, quite the story. And so I added Dranitsaris actually to my adoptive name 10 years ago, I guess it was about 10 years ago. So to really sort of claim my full story of origin, which is both as a member of the Dranitsaris family and as a member of the Hilliard family.
Now, how am I supposed to follow that? The conversation on business and leadership.
Nature versus nurture. Nature versus nurture. We can have a great conversation about that.
You got it.
Topic which I agreed to was business and leadership.
Fair enough.
Now, listen up. Peter Drucker has the only definition of leader that I accept, which is someone with followers. Everything that you can list about a leader is an attribute, and somebody can have some, maybe even all, but if nobody's following them, they're not a leader. Enough there. So we've now put aside the topic of who or what is a leader. We're not going to get into the attributes because that would take 2 months and we still wouldn't be done. But the one thing that leadership has in common, whether it's business, politics, or anything else, and what is sorely lacking today, and if you want to disagree with me, you can, is accountability. So my first question for daughter, gotta be fair. You got to go first. And what is it? If you agree with me, what is accountability?
So I agree with you. I do agree. Accountability is a gap. In fact, our book, So You Think You Can Lead, was all, originated from our experiences we were having with our clients, where all of the leaders were being excessively permissive. And we talk about permissive leadership as having replaced effective leadership, or leading with authority, as we like to call kind of the perfect world. And from our lens, accountability is actually a process by which leaders cultivate followership to produce a particular outcome. So when we lead for accountability, when we create an environment in which people can take accountability, or act from a place of accountability, it's because the leaders are doing the things that need to be done and taking the actions that need to be done that actually produce this thing we all call accountability. So we break it down and look at it from that. What's the process and the behavior that leads to us being able to say that accountability now exists? But that's sort of a, there isn't an easy definition. I think that's where Anna and I started doing a lot of our work with our clients, was accountability. There was a lot of misconceptions about it. Well, people either have it or they don't have it, or, there's nothing I can do about it. It's just the way they are. And so we've actually broken it down into some really discrete, specific steps and actions that then lead to this outcome we want, which is accountability.
And if somebody is going to hold someone accountable, including themselves accountable, they have to be able to take criticism.
Mm-hmm.
By which I mean negative criticism, because a critique can also be positive. How do you deal with people who are not capable of taking criticism? And when you criticize them, they take it personally, they become defensive, the walls go up, and nothing positive can result.
So, such a great question, because it's one of the skills that we teach leaders is non-defensive communication. Because who actually likes negative, quote unquote, negative criticism, but it's a necessary part of the accountability cycle, given that course correction is necessary. And employees can take anything from a leader delivering an expectation, to a course correction, to a confrontation, to just raising an issue, and get their back up around it and get on the defensive. And if a leader isn't prepared to diffuse the defensiveness, and to deal with the natural resistance that comes up when you tell someone that they're not as perfect as they like to believe that they are, without the skill of being able to dismantle the defensive behavior, leaders can be at a loss. And this is one of the main reasons why leaders don't give feedback and don't course correct, because they don't want to deal with the fallout of having to deal with someone's defensiveness. And of course, the employee gets blamed for that. It's not the leader's fault. But we always look to the skill development and what a leader actually needs in order to manage through the performance accountability cycle.
What is that? The performance, what did you call it? The performance accountability cycle?
Yes.
So
Yeah,
you explain it.
We talk about it as there's 3 phases that leaders lead through in order to produce accountability or effective followership. The first phase is planning to succeed, which we find most of our clients skip altogether. They offer the great big ask, as we say. It's like, so can you do this thing for me? But they don't actually go into the planning, which is defining what the expectations are around that ask and actually directing the plan for execution. So everybody's on the same page of what are we doing? How are we going to do it? When is it going to be done by? How are we going to measure our success? The second phase is managing for alignment, which is making sure that as you're in the execution stage of that performance, of that task, of that project, whatever it is, that we're correcting and we're re-instructing and redirecting as is needed, in order to make sure we're going to get the outcome that we want. So this is part of that fostering accountability along the way, and confronting if they go completely off track and get derailed. But confronting is kind of this thing we hold in our back pocket around accountability. Most of the time for us as leaders is correcting and re-instructing directing or redirecting. That's really fundamental. And the third phase is around engagement. And this is the piece where we're reviewing, engaging for growth. So we're reviewing the performance and how did it go and what worked and what didn't work. So people get used to this conversation around feedback and criticism, so that we're constantly identifying for improvement. And then we're taking the time as leaders to really engage them in their performance and in their growth going forward. So it's transactional. It's done not as part of a performance management process, but every time I, as a leader, delegate something to one of my staff or someone on my team, I'm going through these three phases. I'm planning to succeed, I'm managing for alignment, and then I'm engaging for growth.
Years ago, I had a colleague who you couldn't talk to. First off, he was one of these individuals who believed he was perfect. And if you've never had the pleasure of working with someone like that, you are very lucky. But he had messed up big time. And we were having a meeting. He was there. The president of this was a nonprofit, was there. The chairman of the board was there. And this guy just didn't get it. He was told, you've got to clean up this mess. Well, I didn't make a mess. And does anybody have any, then whoever it was said, well, how are we going to repair this? And they looked at me, and whenever I was in trouble, they would call me doctor. And they said, doctor, what do you think we should do? And I already had a plan to repair the damage. And we repaired it. Not that I deserve a pat on the back or anything like that. That's not the point of the story. When he left the room, I looked at the president and the chairman of the board, and I said, I don't get it. The man's got to be 10 years my senior. Why is it that he doesn't understand the basics of accountability, and then it's all right to admit that you made a mistake and you're going to take responsibility and fix it? That's the definition of accountability, with all due respect to what you said earlier. And they looked at me and they said something, and now I'm getting to my question for you, Anne. They said, if he wasn't taught as a youth, then as an adult, it's just not going to sink in. So how do you deal with an adult who doesn't understand the basics of accountability?
Well, it is something that can be taught. It's when people are so entrenched in their image of themselves as perfect, and they're so defended, as you're talking about someone who's obviously his image of himself was of one of, I'm perfect, it's got to be somebody else's mess, it's not my mess. It's not that he couldn't learn accountability, it was just that his mindset was, I don't accept that I could make a mess. And that gets down to something below accountability, is the mindset. If we have a fixed mindset around anything, we're not going to be open. We're not going to think we need to learn anything. We're not going to be open to what is being given to us, or the opportunities to learn new skills and develop. And we find one of the most challenging things with the leaders that we work with is it takes time to get them to the place where if they learn new skills, it's going to make their lives earlier. Because most of the time they want us to fix their employees, not because they don't see themselves as contributing to the issue. Once they do, and they're willing to learn and practice, they can actually grow and change their behavior. But if their mindset is, I'm okay, Jack, nothing's wrong with me, you're absolutely right. You can't train or develop these people.
Heather, you look like you wanted to add something.
Just the fact that, when we're dealing with individuals like these, and they exist in every single one of our client organizations that we go into, and that's at all levels, not just at the leadership level, but at all levels. And I think part of the challenge is that if they haven't learned it at home and through their childhood, and they're coming into workplaces where leaders are not cultivating followership and ownership and what it means to take responsibility for something and what's acceptable and unacceptable, that they don't ever learn it. And then they get promoted, and they get promoted because all along that individual's journey, people have said it's okay that he doesn't take responsibility for what he's done. Right. And if he's made a mistake, and this is the I think where we often forget that part of a job as a leader, if we are cultivating followership, is that we have to meet people where they're at, and we have to develop and equip them with some of those skills and behaviors that perhaps they didn't learn before they started working from us. But we see leaders these days going, well, that's just the way they are. There's nothing I can do about it. They're entitled. They're, they're not motivated. We hear all of these excuses because leaders themselves don't know how to develop their people in order to, again, get to that place of followership. So I just think that, there is always an opportunity, but there also, to Anne's point, there's a percentage of them that we just say they're not developable. They are so defended that there's just absolutely nothing you can do. And typically organizations end up having to part ways with these individuals or continuously work around them, one or the other.
And you want to say something?
It's the idea of the great lead. I'm a great leader, and so I can't possibly have done anything wrong.
For a moment, and this is a compliment to the two of you, I was a bit concerned that I referred to you as ladies, because there will be some individuals who may or hear this and say, well, that's very offensive. You shouldn't call them ladies. Don't ask me why. I don't know why. But they're out there. You can't call women ladies. You're not supposed to call men gentlemen. And I could not care less. But that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about normal interactions with sane people. And one interaction that is difficult for many, you touched on it. I believe it was you, Heather, delegation. Now, I've always been terrible at delegating. I would give instructions in writing, knowing full well that the job wasn't going to be done right. And then I would do the work while the person I delegated it to did the work. And that way the next day I could go over to my boss, which I would do, and I would say, well, you told me to delegate. These were the written instructions. This is what we got. How long will it take to fix it? And I said, won't take any time at all because I did it myself while she was doing it. And I said, please don't ask me to delegate anymore. So I'm one of those that had a great deal of difficulty delegating, except in one case. When I was running a summer camp, as I like to say, for 10 years one summer, it was the most intense responsibility I ever had. I want to make it clear that children are a delight and parents should be locked up and the key should be thrown away. Moving on, I had 100 counselors. I had 3 or 4 directors, and I couldn't do all the work. I had to delegate. I was forced to delegate. And that was when I learned the importance of delegation, because if you don't delegate, you can't get major tasks accomplished successfully. But even though you're delegating, you still have to hold the person responsible, and you have to take responsibility for yourself. But it is a huge step for a lot of people to start delegating because they're afraid, as I was. Well, I'm just going to have to do it again. I might as well do it myself and it'll take less time. So Heather, how do you deal with people like me who don't want to delegate?
Well, I think part of it is, and that piece of we've tried it and it hasn't worked for us, and then we get gun shy with it, right? And we convince ourselves that it's just not possible, and I have to keep doing these things myself. And I think part of the problem is that we look at delegation as a thing, like it's like I've delegated, as opposed to a process where we actually have to consider where is the person at? What is their readiness to perform this task? What is the instruction or teaching that I need to give? I have a hard time with delegating because I tend to give information and not direction. So I've had to learn really to understand the distinction about what I'm communicating and how I'm communicating it, has a direct impact on whether or not I get back what it is that I'm looking for, right? And so, and then that also in the delegation process, especially when someone's learning, I have to stay in it with them. I can't just say, here, go do it. I might say, here, go away, think about it. Let's have another conversation. Here, do my first pass for me. Let's have a conversation and iteration. So in the delegation process, for us to do it effectively, there's a lot of work to it. And that also adds to the reason why people just say, I don't want to delegate. It's just easier to do it myself. But long term, we miss out on the opportunity of extending our capacity and our footprint and our ability to have impact because we're doing all of the work ourselves.
Andy, you want to add anything?
Yeah, plus the skill gap that it leaves below the leader, because you're not having that more strategic view of talent development, where if I take the time now, I will be able to go on vacation and not have to check into the office every day. And I will have someone to immediately move up should I move up in the organization as well. And so not investing the time, like slowing down to invest the time in the immediate present, and simply means that you're getting locked in to having doing jobs that really that they don't belong to you. I was having a conversation with a client this morning about this, where she realized that she's doing the lion's share of the leadership activities of her leadership team. She has assistant directors, and she's doing all of the performance reviews, all of the hiring, all of the performance correction with 20 people, because her assistant directors don't want to do it. And so she just went, okay, easier to do it myself than deal with this resistance that I'm getting. And so we're taking this approach now where she has a plan to introduce, certain tasks that they have to do every week, that she's downloading finally to them to take this stuff off her plate, because it's impossible. This woman's shredded because she just doesn't have time for anything.
Well, there's a much easier way to handle that. She can fire the 20 of them and hire me to find 20 new ones for her. It's really very simple. There's no need to complicate things.
Yeah, try finding nurses in Ontario at this time. Good luck with that.
That's not just in Ontario.
Yeah.
No, I know.
I worked at a nursing home. Granted, it was probably 15 years ago. And a nurse, fresh out of school, no real work experience, would get a $5,000 signing bonus if they stayed on the job for 6 months.
Yep.
Yep.
We would all say, hey, wait a minute here. Something's just not right. Well, there aren't any nurses. Simple. Yep. Now you totally took me off of my train of thought. You were talking about productivity. When you are a leader in business, you have to set the metrics. What's the simplest way to get buy-in for the metrics that you're going to use to judge someone's productivity, effectiveness, simply if they're doing a good job? Either one, Anne.
My initial thought on that one is I don't think we need to get buy-in because we're the leader. And so part of our job is to define what success looks like. Where we might have to get the alignment with our direct report is ensuring that they understand it, that we're supporting their ability to meet those expectations, that we're helping them to remove any obstacles to being successful. But I think it's one of the challenges our leaders face when they bring their employees into some of these conversations at a point where, as though the employees have more expertise or more knowledge than they actually do. And then we sort of set ourselves up sometimes, and we see this all the times with our clients, where their employees see themselves as peers to their boss, and so they don't really have to take direction from their boss or follow them. And so that's kind of my initial sort of thought, where the buy-in is about getting them to align themselves and their behavior and their performance to those expectations. And that's where we focus it, not so much in the definition of it, right? Because that is the job from a leadership perspective, from an organizational perspective, that those expectations are being established, and then we're supporting them to achieve them.
Anne, you want to add anything?
Yeah, and just to add to that, one of the things that leaders have become increasingly sensitive is when an employee will say, I'm so overwhelmed, I can't possibly do that. And of course, then the leader takes the work back, instead of saying, well, let's sort through and let's see how much time you're spending on X, Y, and Z, and let me help you prioritize, because doing one thing at a time is not overwhelming. Thinking that you have to do everything at one time, we can overwhelm ourselves about, something that's going to happen next year if we want to sit down and think about it, but it's not happening in the present moment. And so it's that idea of not reacting to what an employee is when they say, I've got too much on my plate, and not immediately saying, oh, tell me what exactly you have on your plate. So I get to decide, to Heather's point, I get to decide what is too much and what you can and can't do relative to what is normal, what's a normal timeline in our organization, and how long this particular task takes.
I have one final question for each of you, and I'm going to put on your contact information. And since I started with you, Anne, I will let Heather go first, but you're both going to get the same question. So, Anne, you have time to prepare. Is there anything that I didn't ask that you wish I had asked? And if I had asked, what would you have said?
Yeah, see, Anne gets time to consider this question. Okay, all right. I think the one thing that I wish you had asked was about, what is it that's driving this lack of accountability, the lack of followership that we see in organizations. And I want to speak to the fact that we see so many leaders that we don't have the model today. And that leaders can sort of say, this is what I'm aiming for. Like we've gone from having a more autocratic leadership style that was sort of more of the predominant style. And we went through this phase and for a few decades where leaders like, I don't want to be that. That's not what I want to be. And so we saw this sort of swing over to what we talk about in terms of permissive leadership. And for those of you leaders that are out there, you're sort of having to look at this next sort of stage. If you're really going to lead for accountability, if you're really going to foster that followership, is that you have to actually get comfortable with that middle ground where you are still directing and governing the work that it is that's being done without fear of being accused of micromanaging, as we often hear, while at the same time attending to the relational aspects of your role as a leader. That there's a really big balancing act that happens in leadership in organizations, but also, basically in the community, pretty anywhere where you've got leadership, where we're having to attend to what it takes to actually execute and drive that accountability while we're still taking care of and ensuring that there's the engagement and the relational aspect of leadership happening.
Anne?
Well, I think the question would be around why don't leaders take themselves seriously as a professional leader? And in speaking to that, it's thinking about many leaders who are just put into managerial and leadership roles because they are excellent at a functional activity. And so you can look at an engineer or an accountant, or, even in construction, any industry where a person is excelling at doing a specific task and function that they were educated for, and they get put into roles where they have to lead people and they get absolutely no training at all. And with the increasing expectations in our society about leaders having to be empathetic, having to be nurturing, having to take care of psychological safety and security, and a lot of leaders, they don't even know the basics of how to hold their people accountable or give feedback in a way that brings their people into alignment. And I really encourage any leader out there who hasn't looked at, not how do I become a good leader, but how do I become more effective by learning what competencies on the people leadership side of the equation that they actually need to develop up.
And I thank you. Heather, I thank you. This has been a lot of fun and extremely informative, and I'm sure our viewers appreciate it as well.
Thank you,
for
Bruce.
having us, Bruce.
This has been my pleasure.
Yes.
I'm Bruce Hurwitz. Thank you for watching, and as always, please stay focused on success.